Salve Marcus, quid agis hodie? Ego sum Livia, filia Gaius Cornelius Maximus, et habito in Villa Magna, prope Tiberim. Dr. Richard Thompson froze, his pen hovering over his notepad as the 23-year-old woman lying on his hypnotherapy couch began speaking in what sounded like fluent Latin, but with pronunciation patterns and grammatical structures he'd never heard before. Sarah Williams had come to him seeking past life regression therapy to address recurring nightmares and unexplained phobias. What was happening now was far beyond anything in his 15 years of clinical experience. The session had started normally. Enough. Sarah, a marketing coordinator from Chicago with no background in ancient languages or history, had settled comfortably into the hypnotic state Dr. Thompson had guided her through. She'd begun describing vague images of ancient buildings, stone streets, and people in flowing robes. Then something had shifted. Her voice had changed, becoming more formal, more confident, and she'd begun speaking in this strange, archaic-sounding language with perfect fluency and obvious emotional investment. "Doctor," whispered his assistant Monica from her chair in the corner. "Should I stop recording?" Dr. Thompson shook his head, gesturing for silence. He'd seen clients speak gibberish during regression sessions before, the mind's attempt to create something that sounded ancient or foreign. But this was different. Sarah's pronunciation was consistent, her sentence structures seemed logical, and she was clearly having a conversation with someone only she could see, responding to questions and laughing at appropriate moments as if she truly understood every word she was saying. "Pater meus negotiator est, et mater mea textilia facit. Habemus servo septem et villam pulcram cum hortis magnis. Amo curere in campis cum fratre meo." Sarah continued speaking for nearly 10 minutes, occasionally switching between what sounded like casual conversation and more formal, ritualistic speech. Her facial expressions changed with the language, showing joy, concern, reverence, and sadness in perfect synchronization with her words. Dr. Thompson found himself mesmerized not just by the linguistic performance, but by the complete personality, transformation taking place before his eyes. When he finally brought Sarah out of hypnosis, she looked around the office with confusion, clearly disoriented by the transition back to her normal consciousness. "How long was I under?" she asked, sitting up and pushing her hair back from her face. It felt like hours. "I had the most vivid dream about being in ancient Rome. I could see everything so clearly, the buildings, the people, even the smell of the streets." "Sarah," Dr. Thompson said carefully, "do you remember speaking during the session?" "Speaking? I don't think so. Was I talking?" She looked genuinely puzzled. "What did I say?" "You were speaking in what sounded like Latin, very fluent Latin. Do you have any background with ancient languages?" Sarah laughed, a sound that seemed oddly out of place given what had just transpired. "Latin? Are you serious? I barely passed. High school Spanish. I couldn't conjugate a Latin verb if my life depended on it." Dr. Thompson exchanged glances with Monica, who was still staring at Sarah with a mixture of fascination and bewilderment. In 30 years of psychological practice, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. "I'd like to play back part of the recording if that's okay with you. I think you should hear what happened." As Sarah listened to her own voice speaking, fluently in the ancient language, her face went pale. The voice on the recording was unmistakably hers, but the confidence, the pronunciation, the sheer fluency were completely foreign to her conscious self. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That's not me. I mean, it sounds like me, but I don't understand a single word I'm saying." "But you seem to be having conversations," Monica observed. "You were responding to questions, laughing, even getting emotional at certain points." Sarah shook her head vigorously. "I don't remember any of that. I remember being in Rome, seeing buildings and people, but I don't remember talking to anyone, and I certainly don't remember speaking a language I don't know." Dr. Thompson made a decision that would change all their lives. "Sarah, I'd like to send this recording to a colleague of mine at the university. Dr. Elizabeth Harrington is a professor of ancient languages and linguistics. If what you spoke was indeed Latin, she'll be able to tell us. Would you be comfortable with that? 3 days later, Dr. Thompson's phone rang at 7:30 in the morning. Dr. Harrington's voice was tight with excitement and something that sounded like fear. "Richard, I need to see you immediately. Bring the client if possible. What I've discovered about that recording. It's impossible, but it's also undeniably real." "What do you mean impossible?" "The language your client spoke isn't modern Latin, and it isn't classical Latin either. It's what we call vulgar Latin, the colloquial form spoken by common people in the Roman Empire between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD. But Richard, here's the problem. We only know fragments of how vulgar Latin actually sounded when spoken. Most of our knowledge comes from written inscriptions and graffiti. No one alive today should be able to speak it fluently with accurate pronunciation and regional dialect variations." Dr. Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying your client spoke a dead language with perfect fluency, including pronunciation patterns that we've only theorized about based on linguistic reconstruction. She used verb forms and vocabulary that haven't been documented in any surviving texts. And Richard, she spoke with what I can only describe as a distinctly Roman patrician accent from approximately 150 AD, the meeting in Dr. Harrington's university. Office 3 hours later was unlike anything Dr. Thompson had ever experienced. Dr. Harrington had invited 2 other colleagues, Dr. James Morrison, a specialist in ancient Roman history, and Dr. Catherine Webb, an expert in psycholinguistics and consciousness studies. "Before we begin," Dr. Harrington said, settling behind her desk with a thick folder of papers, "I want to establish that what we're discussing today challenges every conventional understanding of language acquisition, historical knowledge, and human consciousness." She pressed play on the recording, and Sarah's voice filled the room, speaking the ancient language with startling clarity and emotion. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his eyes widening as he recognized specific phrases and cultural references. "She's describing daily life in a wealthy Roman household," he translated. "She says her name is Livia, daughter of Gaius Cornelius Maximus, and she lives in a large villa near the Tiber River. She's talking about her father's business dealings, her mother's textile work, their 7 slaves, and running through the fields with her brother." The name Gaius Cornelius Maximus appears in several historical documents from that period, Dr. Harrington added. "He was a real person, a wealthy merchant who lived in Rome during the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius, around 150 AD. Sarah, who had been listening in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up. "That's impossible. I've never studied Roman history. I don't even like historical movies. How could I know about a real person from ancient Rome?" "That's exactly what makes this so extraordinary," Dr. Webb interjected. "From a psycholinguistic perspective, what you've done is theoretically impossible. Language acquisition requires years of study and practice. No one can simply remember how to speak a dead language fluently, complete with cultural context and historical accuracy. Unless," Dr. Morrison said quietly, "she actually lived it." The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Dr. Thompson, a man of science who had built his career on rational analysis and evidence-based treatment, found himself confronting evidence that challenged every assumption he'd ever made about human consciousness and memory. "Let me play another section," Dr. Harrington said, fast-forwarding through the recording. "This part is particularly remarkable." Sarah's voice continued, but now with a different emotional quality, sadness mixed with fear. "Morbus venet ad urbe multimoriuntur, pater meus dicit nos dissedere debere, sed ego timeo. Quid si non rediemus? Quid si domus nostra non mane?" She's talking about a plague coming to the city. Dr. Morrison translated, his voice grave. "She says many people are dying. Her father says they must leave, but she's afraid. She asks, what if we don't return? What if our house doesn't remain?" "The timing is historically accurate," Dr. Harrington noted. "There was indeed a major plague that struck Rome during the Antonine period, around 165 AD. It killed millions and forced many wealthy families to flee the city temporarily." Sarah was staring at the recording device as if it were a venomous snake. "Stop, please stop. I don't want to hear any more." "Sarah," Dr. Webb said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but what's happening here could revolutionize our understanding of human consciousness. You may be providing evidence that memory, personality, and learned skills can somehow survive physical death and transfer to new individuals. You're talking about reincarnation, Sarah said flatly. You're suggesting that I'm the reincarnation of some Roman girl who died 2,000 years ago. We're scientists, Dr. Thompson replied carefully. We deal in evidence, not beliefs. The evidence suggests that you have access to knowledge and linguistic skills that you shouldn't possess. How that's possible is something we need to investigate further. Over the following weeks, the team conducted extensive tests. They brought in additional linguists, historians, and consciousness researchers. Sarah underwent multiple regression sessions, each time speaking fluent vulgar Latin and providing historically accurate details about life in 2nd century Rome. She described architectural details of buildings that matched archaeological discoveries, named foods and customs that had only recently been confirmed through historical research, and demonstrated knowledge of Roman law, religious practices, and social hierarchies that would require years of specialized study to acquire. Most remarkably, during one session, Sarah began reciting what sounded like poetry in the ancient language. When translated, it turned out to be a previously unknown work by the Roman poet Catullus, or at least a work written in his distinctive style using meter and vocabulary consistent with his documented writings. This is either the most elaborate hoax in academic history, Dr. Harrington told the assembled team during one of their weekly meetings, or we're witnessing evidence of something that fundamentally challenges our understanding of life, death, and human consciousness. Dr. Morrison had been conducting historical research in parallel with the linguistic analysis. I've been digging through every available record from that period. Gaius Cornelius Maximus did indeed have a daughter named Livia. She would have been about 14 years old when the Antonine Plague struck Rome. According to family records I found in the Vatican archives, she died during the plague, probably in 166 AD. So you're saying this girl died as a teenager 2,000 years ago, and somehow her memories, her personality, her linguistic abilities have transferred to Sarah? Dr. Thompson asked. I'm saying the evidence points in that direction, however. Impossible it may seem. The scientific community's reaction was swift and polarized. Some researchers dismissed the findings as elaborate fraud or psychological delusion. Others saw it as groundbreaking evidence for consciousness survival and reincarnation. The recording was analyzed by linguists at Harvard, Oxford, and the Sorbonne, all of whom confirmed its authenticity as accurately spoken vulgar Latin from the correct historical period. Sarah herself struggled with the implications. I keep having dreams now, she told Dr. Thompson during a follow-up session. Dreams about Rome, about Livia's life. I see her family, her house, her daily routines. It's like watching someone else's memories, but they feel so real, so personal. Do you think of yourself as Livia reincarnated? I don't know what I think anymore. Part of me wants to dismiss it all as some kind of psychological anomaly, but I can't explain how I know things I've never learned, how I can speak a language I've never studied. And these dreams, they're not like normal dreams. They're like memories. I can taste the food, feel the textures of the clothes, remember conversations, as if I lived them. The case attracted international attention. Documentary filmmakers, journalists, and researchers from around the world wanted to study Sarah and the recordings. She found herself at the center of a debate that touched on science, religion, philosophy, and the fundamental nature of human existence. What troubles me most, Dr. Webb confided to Dr. Thompson, is that if this is real, if consciousness truly can survive death and reincarnate with intact memories, then everything we think we know about neuroscience, psychology, and the nature of the mind is incomplete. We're dealing with phenomena that our current scientific paradigms simply cannot explain. And if it's not real, Dr. Thompson asked, then we're witnessing the most sophisticated case of cryptomnesia and unconscious knowledge acquisition ever documented. Either way, it's revolutionary. 6 months after the initial session, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone involved in the research. She began studying classical history formally, enrolling in university courses in ancient Roman civilization, Latin, and archaeology. If I'm going to have these memories, these connections to ancient Rome, I want to understand them properly. I want to learn about Livia's world through conventional means as well as through these impossible memories. Her professors were amazed by her intuitive understanding of Roman culture and her uncanny ability to grasp complex historical concepts that typically took students years to master. When she visited archaeological sites in Italy, she often pointed out features and made observations that later proved accurate when compared to historical records. It's as if she has insider knowledge, one professor observed. She understands Roman society not as an academic studying from the outside, but as someone who actually lived within it. The research team eventually published their findings in a groundbreaking paper that sparked heated debate in scientific journals worldwide. While they couldn't definitively prove reincarnation, they had documented something unprecedented: a modern person demonstrating fluent knowledge of an ancient language and culture that should have been impossible for her to acquire through conventional means. Dr. Thompson reflected on how the case had changed his own understanding of human consciousness. I went into psychology believing that the mind was simply a product of brain chemistry and neural networks. Sarah's case has forced me to consider that consciousness might be far more complex and mysterious than we've ever imagined. Whether we call it reincarnation, inherited memory, or something else entirely, we're clearly dealing with phenomena that transcend our current scientific understanding. Sarah herself found peace with the mystery. I may never fully understand how or why I can remember being Livia, but I've learned that some questions don't need definitive answers to be meaningful. These memories, these connections to the past, have enriched my life in ways I never expected. They've given me a sense of continuity, of being part of something larger than just my current existence. The recordings of Sarah speaking vulgar Latin continue to be studied by linguists and consciousness researchers around the world. They represent either the most compelling evidence yet discovered for consciousness survival after death, or the most remarkable case of unconscious knowledge acquisition in modern psychology. Perhaps the truth encompasses elements of both explanations, pointing toward aspects of human consciousness that science is only beginning to understand. What remains undeniable is that a young woman with no training in ancient languages spoke fluently in a tongue that died out 2 millennia ago, demonstrating knowledge of Roman life, culture, and history that she had no conventional way of acquiring. Whether through reincarnation, genetic memory, morphic resonance, or some other phenomenon not yet understood by science, Sarah had accessed information that challenged every assumption about the limitations of human knowledge and the nature of consciousness itself. What do you think explains Sarah's impossible linguistic abilities? Could this be evidence of reincarnation, or is there another scientific explanation we haven't considered yet? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story has opened your mind to new possibilities about human consciousness and the mysteries of life and death, give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that challenge everything we think we know about reality.